Well, this ought to be fun. We're ranking the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL through 7 different traits today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
Shout out Dan Orlovsky.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Joe, happy hump day.
Happy hump day.
And what did we talked about something yesterday that was like a no-brainer cold open? We didn't do it.
I don't know.
What did you text me about yesterday?
Oh, Tavon Austin.
Yeah. Happy International Tavon Austin Day.
Yeah.
To you, in honor of Tavon Austin and his retirement.
Good college player, man. Good college football player.
Tavon Austin was one of the guys that really made me fall in love with college football. Those last 2 years at West Virginia, kind of have a soft spot for West Virginia. And part of that soft spot's because when I first got into the industry, West Virginia was the first place to ever credential me to come in and watch a game, right? So like there's an intimate portion of that for me there. But I go back to what he played in 08, 09, 2010, like that range. Was he a 2011 first round pick by the Rams? Was that the year?
I know,
I'm throwing a lot of years at you. We're not math guys. Like we couldn't even add the 7 earlier.
That was just me.
Pre-show.
It wasn't you. You don't have to fall on that. That was just me.
But like Tavon's night, you ever watch that YouTube video from the highlights of the Oklahoma game where he had like 400 yards and all those touchdowns?
He was a dude, man.
I must have watched that highlight reel 50 times that offseason. I love Tavon Austin, and probably a guy that was a little before his time as far as Tavon Austin today. People talk about like Peter Warrick's like that a little bit. Reggie Bush is like that. I think Tavon Austin belongs in that bucket too.
I think the rule changes of today's game and how the offenses are playing lend itself a lot more to those players. So yeah, I think before their time is a good way to put it.
Fair or foul? Tavon Austin today with Mike McDaniel would be the equivalent of what Devon Achane, a lot of people expect him to be this year.
Yeah, I want to see Devon Achane this year, but I think that's a good parallel. I think that's if you want to see what Tavon Austin in his prime would be in this NFL, that could be a good example of that.
Okay. Very good. Well, maybe the Dolphins will come up again, but maybe they won't. I don't know. I know the Dolphins came up a few times with Dan Orlovsky's quarterback hierarchy on ESPN that came out courtesy of their starting quarterback making the list on a couple of traits. We're going to get into that as well. We're going to do all 7 traits that Dan did over on ESPN. And we're kind of in that weird window of the week where all the preseason games happen. None of the preseason games this week have started. This feels like a perfect opportunity to jump on a topic like this. Really interesting job by Dan. He ranked the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL according to arm strength, ball placement, mechanics, decision-making, pocket presence, rushing ability, and second reaction ability. So then Joe and I said, hey, why don't we do the same? And that is what we've done. And I don't know what your list looks like, and you don't know what mine looks like. Unless you have found the right tab on one of
No.
our shared sheets in which
No. I put this in my own secret spreadsheet, so you
right.
couldn't see it.
I took the risk. I put mine in our shared.
Oh, yeah, that's very, very, very questionable. For everybody, we know that Dan Orlovsky did this. There's a link to his article in today's show notes. So if you want to see his rankings, that's available for you. It is obviously the inspiration for this discussion, and we are not hiding from that.
Yeah, and I think that's what sometimes good content is, right? Is finding inspiration from your peers, and I can't wait to find out how you took some of this, because Dan, like for example, we're starting with arm strength, and Dan, I appreciated the qualifier that Dan put on arm strength. 2 components: being able to throw the ball far downfield, but the ability to fit the ball in tight windows with velocity is the other portion of that. And we've talked about that before. And Dan said he leaned more on that aspect, drive throws, more so than just raw distance down the field, which I think is smart and appropriate relative to how it actually applies to the majority of NFL reps in which arm strength matters.
Yeah.
So,
okay,
here we go.
I'm going to just give you my top 10.
We could go, yeah, probably that's the most efficient way to reveal it is for you to go your top 10. I'll go my top 10. We'll talk about it, talk about differences with Dan, and go from there.
All right. Arm strength for me. Should we go 10 to 1 or 1 to 10?
Go 10 to 1.
All right. And I'll say this, to me, Kyle and I, when we planned this out, kind of came to the conclusion that the back 5 is probably more interesting than the top 5. And I tried to fit a little personal flavor into the back 5 in some spots. And I think that starts with number 10 for me with arm strength is Baker Mayfield. Number 9, I have Jordan Love. Number 8, I have Kyler Murray. Number 7, I have Anthony Richardson. Number 6, Will Levis. Number 5, Aaron Rodgers. Number 4, Matthew Stafford. Number 3, Justin Herbert. Number 2, Patrick Mahomes. Number 1, Josh Allen.
Okay. Josh Allen is also my number 1 for arm strength. I have Mayfield at 10, Stafford at 9, Jordan Love at 8, Lamar Jackson at 7, Justin Fields at 6, Will Levis at 5, Anthony Richardson at 4, Patrick Mahomes at 3, Justin Herbert at 2, Josh Allen at 1.
So you have 2 players I didn't have. That's Lamar and Justin Fields. I will say Justin Fields was one of my first guys off. I definitely discriminated against him because he wasn't necessarily a starter, which I would.
And this will be a spoiler alert for me. This is not the only time that there's a guy who shows up on this list that we've got no clue.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Lamar's a good call. Lamar's got a great arm, so I don't take exception with that. My personal flavor guy was Baker. Did you have Baker? I don't remember.
I had Baker at 10.
Okay, so
you had Rodgers on.
Yeah,
and I did not have Rodgers on.
Okay, who's the other one that I had that you didn't?
Kyler Murray.
Dude's got a hose, man.
He does have a hose.
I would say if you want to discriminate against Kyler for not necessarily using it in that capacity, that's fine. I can live with that.
I also think sometimes with Kyler, it's tough for him. Like this lack of success over the middle of the field.
Yeah.
Like that's where drive throws at times really matter because of congestion and really slotting it in there. Right. And I don't know that his arm strength shows more on, in my opinion, the moon balls and the vertical shots as compared to the drive throws.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was the thought process there on why he was a little bit lower in my pecking order.
Any other thoughts or takeaways here on these lists?
Shout out Will Levis and Anthony Richardson making both of our lists with us not really knowing a whole lot about what those dudes are going to be, but we know they
can spin
rip the ball all over the field.
They can spin it, baby. Yeah, I think for both of those guys, one of the overall takeaways that I'm going to have from this entire project is like some of the correlation with arm strength versus where other guys fall, like second reaction or decision making, and like I don't anticipation wasn't really a part of this, but like the more arm strength that you have, sometimes the less anticipation you will have, and because where one is required, less is required elsewhere. Correct. And so getting back to these younger players like a Levis and a Richardson, them threading that needle and figuring out where they're going to fall into this, and if they're going to be guys that really rely on being visual players and just ripping it all the time, or can they kind of develop some anticipatory elements of their game that complements the arm strength? I think that's going to define their ceiling in a lot of ways, but those guys can rip it for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where the guys who throw with anticipation usually throw with anticipation because they don't have the arm strength to lean on. Right? They have to learn how to do it that way. And I would say for Dan's list, this is a pretty good foundation of like recipe for successful starting quarterback, but I don't think it's an all-encompassing list.
Correct. 100%.
And I think that's worth acknowledging as well, because there are going to be guys that score really well on some of this, but within the confines of their offense, maybe that explains why they have more questions than they do. So we'll get into ball placement next here. Locked on NFL Scouting. Stick with us.
I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
All right. Ball placement. Would you like my list first?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. Number 10 for me was Brock Purdy, San Francisco 49ers. Number 9, Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills. Number 8, Kirk Cousins, Atlanta Falcons. I almost did the thing. Aaron Rodgers at 7, Dak Prescott at 6, Jordan Love at 5, CJ Stroud at 4, Patrick Mahomes at 3, Tua Tagovailoa at 2, and Joe Burrow at number 1.
All right, this is fun. We got some differences here, Kyle Krabs. At number 10 for me, I have Brock Purdy. At number 9, CJ Stroud. Number 8, Aaron Rodgers. 7 is Matthew Stafford. 6, Jared Goff. 5, Kirk Cousins. 4, Patrick Mahomes. 3, Dak Prescott. 2 is Tua Tagovailoa. Good Lord, that was not easy to say. And number 1 is Joe Burrow.
Okay, so you had Stafford at 7 and Jared Goff at 6.
Yes, and I think you had Josh Allen and Jordan Love with players I didn't have on mine.
Correct.
I would say Love was probably my first off.
Okay. Disrespect. Packers fans are going to be real upset with you, you know?
I know. What about the Bills fans?
That's why I made sure Jordan Love was on.
You're smart.
Every
Is he? He's not on every one for me, so this is going to be a problem.
He's not on every one for me either. But it's not a good joke for the disenfranchised Packers fans and the plight that they experience of
the plight. Great word choice.
30 years. All right. So consensus top 2.
Yeah.
We were pretty different on Stroud, although they made both lists. I guess we should start with Stafford, Rodgers, or Stafford, Goff, Love, Allen, the 4 that we were different on.
Okay, so I had Stafford and Rodgers, and you had Allen and Love. That's the difference?
Yes.
In terms of the players, not necessarily the order?
It was Stafford and Goff, yeah.
So we both had Rodgers?
Yes. I had Rodgers at 7.
Gotcha. Okay, so Stafford and Goff. I think for Goff, I've really come to appreciate his down-the-field ball placement and how that's come without necessarily having super good down the field receivers. I think he's developed such great chemistry with some of his guys. And I feel like his ability to operate a lot of that play action stuff and, put those trust St. Brown to win some leverage battles and hit him in stride to create some yak. I just really like it. And I think for Stafford, one of my favorite things about his evolution as a player has been rocket arm, can fit the ball anywhere, but he's become so much more of just winning with physical traits and winning with accuracy and the mental side of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely wanted to include him for those reasons.
And how close, you said Jordan Love was first off. How close was Josh for you?
Close.
Because this is where it's hard, right? Because he has some of the most incredible jaw-dropping throws that it's like, how did he do that?
Yeah.
And then the contrast of that being Jared Goff, I think people would be surprised that Jared Goff, because when Jared Goff's not on a clean foundation and base,
Yeah.
you don't really get those plays. But it's like that trait's not really what we're looking at here, but it does influence how frequently ball placement can show up in some of the more notable throws on any player's resume.
I think Josh has good general accuracy. But I think there's balls that whether it's deep stuff and it gets away from him, or a lot of times on short stuff where it's just like, hey, if you can put that out in front of the guy, he's going to run after catch. And I think run after catch has been a big conversation with the Bills and the lack of it, right? Like Josh has been like bottom 2 or 3 of the NFL in rack per completion over the last several years. And you think to yourself, man, if he was like league average, he'd throw for so many more yards.
Right.
And I think it's a number of factors. I think it's yak skill, part of that with the receivers they've had. Part of it's the type of offense the Bills run and leaning into Josh Allen's physical talent and not necessarily lending itself to a lot of great yak routes, but also it's the ball placement piece that I come away thinking the most about, where it's like, hey, give yourself your guy a chance to catch and run. And I think that your offense could be even more productive.
How much of that do you think, again, bleeding back to a trait that we already acknowledged, but mentioned that there's a contrast between it and the trait that we both just ranked this guy number 1 in the NFL in arm strength? Like, do you feel like the lack of placement to set receivers up for success after the catch comes in part because he's not the most anticipatory thrower, because the ball gets there on time, even though he doesn't necessarily have to anticipate it?
Yeah, I think it's some of that. I think it's also the turn downs. I think Josh wants some bigger plays a lot of times.
That's a good point too.
And so like a lot of times it's like, hey man, take this and there'll be more yak. And so I think it's just as much decision making as it is the arm strength and being a visual player. I think it's all of that baked in together. But I might lean mostly into decision making, and sometimes if you give your guy a chance to turn and run, you might have a nice play as opposed to, all right, you can rip it down the field. We know you can. Just take the easy things sometimes.
Did you have any questions for mine?
I know we spent
kind of grilled you on
I know.
Like, these are the interesting conversations.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Ross Jackson's going to be beside himself potentially today. So what's interesting is well, I kind of explained myself as to why I didn't have Josh and why I did have Stafford.
Yeah.
What do you have any comments that you want to make about your guys in Love
and Josh,
and why you did include Josh?
So both of those guys for me were wow placement with, I won't say outside of structure, but like they facilitate a lot of big plays in tight window throws. And some of that's because of the arm strength. Some of that's because of the arm elasticity. Some of that's because of how good they are athletically to get outside the pocket. But some of these quarterbacks, like Jared Goff, who you had on your list, and Brock Purdy, really for both of us, I would say, and Kirk Cousins, who we both had, and Tua, those guys are ball placement precision within the pocket operations more often than not. So I kind of had 2 separate schools of thoughts that I was trying to weigh out, like, who do I want represented out of this bucket and who do I want represented out of this bucket for what they bring for ball placement, right?
Yeah.
And that was how I kind of settled on getting guys like Love and Allen on the list. Was it's like, if we're going to sit here and look at the consistency of their placement out in front of guys when standing in the pocket and throwing on time, is that really where they wow you? No, not like Burrow with the timing stuff and Tua with the timing stuff and CJ Stroud or a Jared Goff, who was kind of in that consideration for me, but just a little bit lower in that individual bucket that I had for quarterbacks. So I kind of wanted to have a blend of both schools and applications of how I apply ball placement.
Very good. All right,
we got to get another one. We got to get another one before the break.
All right.
Mechanics.
Right.
Go ahead.
Mechanics coming in at number 10, Baker Mayfield. 9, Aaron Rodgers. 8, Kirk Cousins. 7, Justin Herbert. 6, Jared Goff. 5, CJ Stroud. 4, Tua Tagovailoa. 3, Dak Prescott, 2, Matthew Stafford, 1, Joe Burrow.
Okay. And I had Kirk Cousins at 10. We both had Kirk Cousins. I had Brock Purdy at 9. I had Justin Herbert at 8. I had Trevor Lawrence at 7. Matthew Stafford at 6. Tua Tagovailoa at 5. Aaron Rodgers at 4. Dak Prescott at 3. CJ Stroud at 2. And Joe Burrow at 1.
Okay, a lot of similarities here. You had Purdy and Lawrence, and I didn't. Can we talk about Aaron Rodgers? That's the interesting thing to me here, because what I appreciate about Aaron Rodgers, and here's the thing that I've learned about quarterback evaluation, right? I think, gosh, if you're not learning and you're evaluating, I don't know what to tell you, but when I first started watching quarterbacks, I thought it was supposed to look a certain way, right? And like mechanics are supposed to look a certain way, and that's how you fall for a David Fales and a Keith Wenning.
All up on the ear, right. Don't pat the ball.
Yeah,
really
all that stuff.
With the feet.
Looks a certain way. What I've learned through misses is that as long as the mechanics work for themselves, that's what matters most. And what I appreciate so much about Aaron Rodgers is how unique his mechanics are. But boy, oh boy, are you going to screw with him? You're not going to. Like when he does that, like when he throws to his left, he sets right and then does a jump step.
Yep.
It works for him. Like you can watch the film and say, man, that's goofy. Well, do you have any complaints about his accuracy to his left? No. Well, then shut up.
And that's the thing that I've really come to appreciate about Aaron and kind of the new age of rotational throwers is kind of the grace of how they're able to create so much rotational force and whip through their body from different angles and arm slots and foundations with his feet. You know, Jordan Love does that too, right? And you think of, I'm trying to think of another good example of a player. I should probably look at my list.
Right.
But a lot of these guys aren't necessarily like rotational whip throwers. I like Deshaun Watson in Houston before all of the changes that have happened and the injuries with him and the time away from football due to poor decision-making away from field, like all of that. Before all that, you go back to prime Deshaun Watson. You think about Jordan Love, you think about Aaron Rodgers, and it's such a compact and graceful like stroke of the ball. And it allows them, because they can do it from all different kinds of angles, it allows them to do all kinds of different things to the football with its flight path.
Mm-hmm.
What was the story of the Aaron Rodgers throw where like he bent it around the player? Do you remember that? There was some player who was talking about he played Aaron and literally he ear holded on like this side of his head and the ball ended up going to a receiver on the other side of the ball. Why is it zooming?
I love the timing of that. That was fantastic.
I'm going to zoom myself out, but that's the example that I think of as far as Aaron and applying unique rotational mechanics and what it allows you to do to manipulate the ball path of the ball.
Aaron Rodgers, definitely one of the players in my life that has influenced my perspective of the quarterback position as much as anybody, and a player that I became just unbelievably fascinated with how he plays the game, and I fell in love with it. And so maybe I'm not his biggest fan right now, but boy, oh boy, there was a point in time where Aaron Rodgers playing football was appointment TV for me. Okay, Kyle Krabs, we got a million things to do in the last segment, and be sure to stick with us. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. That'll get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Boy, this is fun.
I'm going to try not to make the hand gestures. It's the letter L with your finger and your thumb that forces my camera to zoom in.
I hope you do it again, honestly.
I've turned it off, but it was supposed to be off before.
No,
as
much of that
really
as we can get. My
really
favorite part is when we're not recording and you like get up and you leave your room and
the
then I get to
camera
watch it.
follows
It's unbelievable camera you have there.
Hate to see you go, but love to watch you leave. Right?
That's great.
Decision making.
Okay.
Am I going?
Yeah, I think it's your turn to go first.
Okay. I'll frame it first. The perspective that I used most frequently with decision making was, how often do you choose to put the ball in harm's way? Or how often do you make good decisions as far as what coverage you've received and how you choose to attack? Jalen Hurts at number 10. Dak Prescott at number 9. Jared Goff at number 8. Kirk Cousins at number 7. CJ Stroud at number 5. Jordan Love, or CJ Stroud at number 6. Jordan Love at number 5. Matthew Stafford at 4. Patrick Mahomes at 3. Lamar Jackson at 2. And Joe Burrow at 1.
Okay, this is loaded, right? Decision making at number 10 for me, I have Jalen Hurts. At number 9, I have Lamar Jackson.
Okay.
At number 8, I have Justin Herbert. At number 7, I have Dak Prescott. Number 6, I have Matthew Stafford. Number 5, I have Aaron Rodgers. Number 4, I have Patrick Mahomes. Number 3, I have Kirk Cousins. Number 2, I have Jared Goff. Number 1, I have Joe Burrow.
And Jared Goff getting all the love from Joe Marino.
Yeah, I'm just a fan. Yeah, I'm a fan.
So was Justin Herbert at 5?
I had Herbert at 8.
Herbert at 8, and then who was at 5? Aaron Rodgers?
Yes.
All right, so can we talk about Aaron in this regard?
Sure.
Based off the last 2 years of what we know about Aaron Rodgers, which was the year in Green Bay and the year that we had in...
Right. Doesn't tell a great story, Kyle Krabs.
Even the 4 reps that he had, like, he got hurt because he turned down a slant.
Yeah.
On a cut. You got to know your protection is cutting, and you got to know the ball has to come out. And he gets up the line of scrimmage, and we're going to check everything, go fade ball against cover 1, and take these low percentage throws like he did all year in 2022. That was why he was off for me.
I get it. I think if I can't argue with that. He was frustrating as hell to watch his last year with the Packers because it felt like he was just doing his own thing and not playing the game. Oh boy, the rest of his career is friggin' so good. You know what I mean? And being able to, like, I really valued in the way that I stack this. Okay, what you were saying with what does the coverage tell you to do? Are you running the offense? But like, can you thread the needle of you make dynamic plays and you also take care of the football? And Aaron Rodgers for like 15 years was the epitome of that. So I get it. The last 2 years, brother, are bad, but you know, the sample size I leaned into. I guess we got to keep moving here, don't we?
Well, you could probably give me one other thought, and then we could go. We're at the point now where we only got second reaction and rushing ability. There's probably gonna be a little bit of overlap with. So
right. For your decision making, I felt like. Can you give me your top 3? I thought you had some of your top 3 that kind of surprised me.
Lamar.
That was it, because I had Lamar at 9, and let me just hear from you. Why'd you put him so high?
I mean, how many times does Lamar make a bad decision to throw into coverage? And that was it for me. And then there's also it works uniquely for him because of how dynamic it is when we get into rushing ability. Spoiler alert, but like the times in which he chooses to pull the ball down and run, very rarely is that a bad decision for him based on what he gets from a coverage perspective. That necessarily balance wasn't there early in his career. I think he's become, even at the end of what it was with Greg Roman, a lot more judicious with the decision-making on when to come down. And does he maybe lean on his ability to run a little bit more? Yes, but he makes good decision-making when he runs to not take hits. In addition to, I think he's not frequently throwing really dangerous throws. And some of that is, again, because he can extend plays and either run to run or run to throw and allow guys to uncover and get open in that regard.
I think one of my favorite things about Lamar Jackson's decision-making was the player he was this past year. And when you have access to the whole field in ways that Lamar Jackson has, I think it's probably easy to lean into that and try to be the most dynamic playmaker that you can be. But him understanding the script for them this past year was obviously they ran the ball well, but the defense and how opportunistic it was, and obviously a very talented team on special teams. The reason that they were the number one seed in the AFC was because of how he was able to complement all of that at the quarterback position, despite having all the access that he does. So I really, that weighed heavily on my mind in where I put Lamar Jackson, but obviously you had him a lot higher.
Yeah. Pocket presence.
10 for me is Brock Purdy. We'll see how long it works, brother, but till it doesn't, I gotta put you in here.
Yeah.
Number 9, CJ Stroud. Number 8, Lamar Jackson. Number 7, Geno Smith. Number 6, Josh Allen. Number 5, Jared Goff. Number 4, Joe Burrow. Number 3, Aaron Rodgers. We can rehash that same conversation, but beforehand it was good. 2 is Matthew Stafford, and 1 is Patrick Mahomes.
All right. So you had Rodgers at 3.
Yep.
And 5 you had
Goff.
And 7 you had
Geno Smith.
Okay, spoiler alert, those are the 3 that I didn't have on my list because I'm tracking yours as you're revealing it and copy pasting over from mine into your column and then just filling in the blanks afterward. 10 was Tua Tagovailoa. Brock Purdy was 9. 8 was Dak Prescott. CJ Stroud was 7. Joe Burrow was 6. Jordan Love was 5. Josh Allen was 4. Lamar Jackson was 3. Matthew Stafford 2 and Patrick Mahomes 1.
Was the challenging thing for you when doing this kind of foiling ability to evade pressure with not being responsible for it being there?
Correct.
Like, you know what I mean? Like those are two different things.
Oh, and it's also pocket presence. Does that apply to evading rushers and getting outside the pocket? Does it allude to maneuvering within the pocket to slide away from a rusher and take that extra space that's still in the pocket? I tried to lean a little bit more into that component because I think second reaction and rushing ability kind of takes some of the weight of what you do once you're out of the pocket.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to give guys too much credit for, he evades a rusher and flushes out the B gap, and then he kind of strings along the line of scrimmage and then looks to throw. Like, that's not really a pocket presence play for me. It's more within the maneuverability within the pocket. If you have an edge rusher that screams off, can you step up and evade that player? If you have B gap pressure, can you slide over to your right and then throw the ball? Like, that was kind of how I tried to apply pocket presence.
And that's what, would you say that Tom Brady has the greatest pocket presence in the history of the game?
Yes.
And it's not because of his ability to avoid sacks.
Correct.
Right. Like, but
so that's why for me, guys like Stroud and Tua were well represented here because their wins largely come from maneuvering inside the pocket. I think Brock Purdy has a lot of that as well. But he's kind of got like that artistic flair about it.
Yeah. That
like you kind of alluded to. We'll see how long it keeps working, but right now it's working really well and he's really slippery and he's making it work.
I think, and you had 2 on your list, and I think last year was super good for Tua in that regard. People kind of joke about some of the things that Tua worked on and how he made some of those improvements, but like being able to avoid, but also like when he takes hit, knowing how to take hits. And I thought he showed a lot of growth in that capacity.
Yeah.
Okay. Rushing ability.
Yeah. There's a right answer here at number 1, but we'll see.
Okay. I think I have the right answer, but
I think you do too, but let's find out.
Am I first on this one or you? I don't remember.
I'm first on this one. So it's Dak Prescott at 10, Trevor Lawrence at 9, Patrick Mahomes at 8, Jalen Hurts at 7, Justin Fields at 6, Kyler Murray at 5, Josh Allen at 4, Anthony Richardson at 2, 3, Jaden Daniels at 2, and Lamar Jackson at 1.
Okay. So I haven't had to say this to this point, but I will say that I didn't incorporate like rookies. So they didn't have any ability to make these lists for me.
Yep.
And this is where you're going to see some backup quarterbacks on the list for me. At number 10, Sam Howell. At number 9, Daniel Jones. Don't sleep on Daniel Jones, a runner. The guy can
That's
scoop.
a good call out. That's a good call out.
Number 8, Josh Dobbs. And now here comes the regular players. 7 is Trevor Lawrence. I think that's an underrated component of his game. 6, Anthony Richardson. Obviously, he could be a lot higher once the sample size expands. 5, Kyler Murray. 4, Justin Fields. 3, Jalen Hurts. 2, Josh Allen. Number 1, Lamar Jackson.
So we got the right answer there.
Yeah, they're just Josh and Lamar are stylistically different runners.
Yeah, which is fun. And Jalen Hurts is kind of a blend of the both.
Yeah. But I mean, the more dynamic runner is Lamar Jackson.
So much so that it's been more of a, and I know Buffalo kind of dips their toe in the water with this, but Baltimore continues to be, and it was at times too much before this past year, like an identifying component of their offense is quarterback run scheme.
Right. I would say the Bills it's really diminished in a lot of ways, right? It's Josh scrambles more than anything.
Right.
Occasionally they run that quarterback power, but he runs when he chooses to, not as necessarily designed piece of the offense.
Right.
Productive, but probably smart that way.
No Patrick Mahomes?
No, I thought of, okay, so here Patrick Mahomes is a good call out. He was on the list initially. And then I thought to myself, like, Josh Dobbs and Sam Howell are like,
that's what they do well.
Yeah, that's the thing they do well. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. And I think he appropriately uses rushing ability when he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't even call it like, it's not even close to a major thing that he does. So isolating rushing ability for what it is, I didn't put him. But I understand why you would, because when he chooses to, it's a problem. Yeah.
It's like every time it's like, dude, you finally got everything else taken care of, and now you're going to run off for 30
yards. By the way, here's an 18-yard run on 3rd and 6. Hope you enjoyed that. Eat this.
All right, so let's bundle this largely with second reaction skills and bring this thing to a close.
So in second, so you're not going to see Josh Dobbs and Daniel Jones and Sam Howell here. Second reaction for me, 10, CJ Stroud. I think he's got a chance to climb big time here. 9, Brock Purdy. 8, Kyler Murray. 7, Jalen Hurts. 6, Justin Herbert. 7, dude, I am. This is terrible.
You went from 6 back to 7.
Okay. Stroud 10, Purdy 9, Murray 8, Stroud, Hurts 7. I'm falling apart here.
Keep going up the list. Don't go back
6,
down. Keep going up.
Justin Herbert.
6 Herbert.
5, Jordan Love. 4, Aaron Rodgers. 3, Lamar Jackson. 2, Josh Allen. 1, Patrick Mahomes.
So it was Lamar, Allen, Mahomes, last 3.
Yeah, I know that was super.
This is actually why they have a time cutoff for us on the show. We turn into gremlins at 40 minutes.
Speak for only me. I'm the only gremlin so far. Let's see what you got here. Can you get through your list?
I have Joe Burrow at 10, Kyler Murray at 9, Jalen Hurts at 8, Caleb Williams at 7, Matthew Stafford at 6, Brock Purdy at 5, Jordan Love at 4, Lamar Jackson at 3, Josh Allen at 2, and Patrick Mahomes at 1.
Okay, so we got a little personal flair here. I think Caleb Williams is certainly going to be on this, and I think he even shown some glimpses of that with his preseason debut.
Right.
So I think he'll be on this list.
So with rookies, the thing that I tried to do was, if whatever your identifying trait is, like Jaden Daniels, he's obviously got the ability to throw the ball down the field, but like his rushing ability and hitting 23 miles per hour or whatever it was, like in the open field as a runner last year, like that's such a dynamic part of his game. For Caleb Williams, it can be good and bad, but he really leans and is at times identified by what he does outside of structure when things get off the rails. So that was, for the rookies, how I tried to kind of pick and choose, like, where am I willing to let a rookie be represented on this list?
Yeah, and I think this is such a fascinating thing because, like, some of the young players, you mentioned Caleb Williams, but even like an Anthony Richardson, a Will Levis, maybe a Bryce Young can get into this conversation. I think there's a lot of guys that are close. You put Burrow on there. Is that I don't think he's a bad second reaction player. I wasn't inspired to put him, so I'd like to hear from you on that.
So he was kind of kind of how you see CJ Stroud is I also tried to compartmentalize ability of second reaction versus the decision-making and sustainability of your second reaction stuff. Like you could have a second reaction. Brock Purdy's a good example of this. Brock Purdy's secondary reaction to extend the play is really good. Now, the decision-making once he extends the play, there's a whole process versus results debate to be had there. But at the very least, you can't deny it's like, darn, this dude's really slippery. And he can create a lot of additional opportunities. Sometimes they go good. Sometimes they go bad, and he isn't made to pay for them. And every once in a while, he is made to pay for them. And Burrow was the same thing where it's like, is he really going to kill you outside the pocket? No. But he, for better or for worse, has just enough of that slipperiness and kind of pocket feel that he can give you those opportunities to then put the ball up for his playmakers to make plays for him, which is, I think, what you've seen him do most often in his second reaction stuff.
Yeah. I can appreciate that. I thought about him. I did for sure.
I'm surprised you didn't have Matthew Stafford on here.
Me too.
Stafford's really well represented. I had Stafford. Mahomes I had on 6 categories. He was the only quarterback that was in 6 out of 7 categories. Stafford was one of the guys that had 5.
I think I'm thinking a lot of 2022 Stafford. It's bleeding on my mind a little bit. And that's probably a little bit unfair. I would say he's close. He was one of my first guys off. Him and Burrow were a couple of my first guys off, to be honest with you. But I think I've seen a little bit of Stafford, especially with the Rams. Like the scheme is designed to do certain things. And like sometimes I didn't love when it wasn't there, what it turned into. And for some reason that stood out to me. More so in 22.
I think Matthew's best work in second reaction stuff is the throws, not his legs. But like there's some throws that he hits where plays kind of get stretched.
Yeah.
That's like, wow, man. Like, how did you fade away from pressure like that and get that ball to that area of the field with that amount of touch and accuracy down the field? Like, that for me with Stafford is when I think with second reaction stuff. It's not, free runner, tuck the ball, get outside the pocket, put the flat defender in a bind, and then either going to run for a first down or going to drop it up over your head and let a guy run for 20 yards.
Right.
This
is fun. Yeah, enjoyed it.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up here before Joe completely turns into a gremlin and Ross Jackson comes in here and puts us all in locked on purgatory for overshooting the
don't want to be there
timestamp. So thank you to Dan Orlovsky for the inspiration for today's show. Thank you guys for listening. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here. You can find us on YouTube again or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Come back and see us again tomorrow.